we are looking at a very controversial, a very difficult, a frightening passage. And but it shouldn't be a passage that we ignore. We shouldn't just skate over this and merrily look at the passages that talk about forgiveness and love, when we need to take a complete understanding of what the Bible says. And that's what we're doing as we go through the book of Romans. We've got a series that will help us, we hope, to understand the world around us. Because we need to be aware that the world around us has a flow. Andrew last week talked about a climate of opinion. It has a flow of opinion. It has a mindset. And we should not just, as Christians, if we're Christians this morning, just adopt that mindset. We shouldn't just go with that flow. The aim of this series is to equip us so that we have confidence in our faith, so that we can share it with clarity and boldness. Some time ago, our washing machine, not the one we've got now, but the one we had before, it was only 2 years old and it went belly up. So we called in a washing machine engineer. Now, this fellow was really good. He was very thorough. He came, he took one look at the machine in his thoroughness and declared that this machine was sort of unfixable. And he told me why, and he showed me why. And it really did. This fellow who you know, was a real character. All we did was ply him with a cup of tea and a lot of biscuits. I didn't even pay a call-out fee. And we applied him with a cup of tea and biscuits, and then he started to tell us. And he explained, look, this is why this machine's unfixable. It's been made cheaply with no real access to get in there and fix stuff. And then as he talked us through, he said, look, these are the sort of washing machines that you should buy. One of them was a Millet. You have to take a mortgage out to get a Millet, don't you? Oh. Anyway, he gave us a list of some others, and they were really, you know... And then he also said, these are the machines you don't want to buy. And one of the things he also said, which I found fascinating, he said, these machines, and he listed a whole load off. I'm not going to say just because everybody would be thinking, don't name my washing machine, please. Anyway, he listed a whole load of machines off, and he said, you know, they're all made by the same company. Underneath, you have the same problems. It's the same washing machine. It has a different badge on the front, but exactly the same washing machine underneath, made by the same people. And he listed them. He said, look, avoid these, but buy these. Now, there's only about one or two of those that I could actually afford. But in that conversation with this man, he never charges it. In that conversation, my eyes were open to the world of washing machines. So when we went out next, myself and Elspeth went out next to buy another washing machine, we went out saying, ooh, not that one. Ooh, yeah, that one's okay. And we went out knowing the difference, because an expert who took these things apart and reassembled them day after day, he knew the ones that he couldn't fix. He knew the ones that he kept fixing over again. He knew the ones that didn't break down. And he told us. When a person becomes a Christian, their eyes are opened, not to the world of washing machines, but to the spiritual world that God has, that is around us. Our eyes are open, and because our eyes are open to spiritual truths, we see the world differently. And that is why it's so important that we don't just take on board the mindset, the flow of the world around us. And one of the things that we are shown is how this world, the Bible portrays this, and it's there in Romans chapter 1, spelt out for us, how this world got in the mess that it's in, how we have made a mess of everything. Let me show you some funny pictures. Look at this one, first of all. Little boy, jam pot on his hand, jam all around his face and all over his bedding and his cushion and all the rest of it. Next one, let's look at this next picture. Someone has discovered nail varnish and mascara. A toddler has got in there and found these things, and then mum comes into the bedroom to find the mess that the toddler had left. How about this next one? You might have seen this one. How about that? Two little boys discover emulsion. Whoa, this is good. Fantastic. And look what they've got. They've got it on the settee. I think the settee's leather, so it might wipe down. All right, they've got it on the telly, the coffee tables. They are covered. But my favourite is this next one. Just look at this. All right. Now, each one of those pictures has a story behind it. All right, the parent walks in and sees that particular mess, and they're thinking, how did this happen? What has gone on? Now just look, if you look at the picture, you can start to understand, kind of work out what has happened in that picture. Behind the mess that we have in the world today is a story. And the Bible tells us that story so that we understand the mess that we've got, how we got in that mess, and also how we can fix it. Now, I recognize a lot of people in the world do not want to know the Bible story. A lot of people in the world would disagree with the Bible story, but that also comes out in this passage. So I want us to consider 2 points, and really, if you look at these verses, we are only looking at 2 of the verses in this passage. We're going to look at verse 18 and verse 21, because I think the rest of the passage holds together on those 2 verses. Verse 18 tells us this: God is angry and he is dishing out judgment. Not punishment. I think judgment is different from punishment. Often in the case of judgment, the idea is hopefully to turn people around so they come back. The idea with punishment is often that that's final and see. But anyway, God is angry and he is dishing out judgment. That is what verse 18 tells us. And then verse 21 tells us that mankind has lost the knowledge of God. Mankind had the knowledge of God, but lost it. And then the other verses that hang around that, those 2 verses, actually tell us the consequences of God's anger and judgment and the consequences of mankind losing the knowledge of God. So I want us to consider now, this is not an easy passage. And it may be that as we think this through this morning, you come to me with a mountain of questions. All right? Hopefully they'll all be multiple choice questions. No, but I can fully understand this passage being a struggle to take in, because it is so different from the worldview around us. So let's consider that first little section. God is angry and dishing out judgment. We don't like that idea, do we? We love the idea of God being loving and kind and fluffy and warm. But the Bible also portrays, yes, there is that loving element. And as Sarah pointed out in the verses that we looked at today, God is a forgiving God and longs to forgive. But God is also a holy God who is angry. That word angry, in some old versions of the Bible, is the word wrath in verse 18. It doesn't just mean angry, it means more than that. It means furious. God is furious. Not just a little bit angry. He is absolutely furious. Read the verse 18. The wrath of God, the fury of God is being revealed from heaven against all the ungodliness and the wickedness of people who suppress the truth. I've chatted to a few people just recently. I don't know how it happened this way, but a couple of people, and they mentioned to me that they were angry with God. Now, I didn't think it was appropriate or the right thing to say, but actually very few of us turn it round and think, well, is God angry with me? And the Bible actually says in your natural state, before salvation, before you find God, or as it were, God finds you, God is furious with you. Now let me kind of fit that in. Let's imagine for some reason I turn up on your door. I knock on the door, 2 suitcases, and I just burst into your house. And you're, oh, what's going on? And I say, I'm staying with you now. And I go upstairs. You haven't invited me in. You haven't said, do you like a tea or coffee? I bolt upstairs. I get into your bedroom. I throw all your stuff out of your bedroom, and I put all my stuff in it. And then I go downstairs, and I plonk myself in front of the TV. I grab your remote control, and I just say, what's for dinner? Now imagine I do that to you. Imagine I show you no respect in the time that you're there. You're being very nice to me. Imagine that I don't pay you anything. I don't do any housework. You know, I ask questions about when my washing will be done and when my ironing will be done. And I do all this. Now, in that situation, wouldn't you have the right to be angry with me? You would, wouldn't you? You'd be furious. Who is he coming into my house, tearing apart my bedroom, taking over my house, my life? Who is he to do that? In a very similar way, that is what we have done. God has given us so much. And then what have we done? We take it. And it reveals, these verses reveal why God is angry. It says this: God is angry, first of all, with who? Now, we're going to look at how God displays his anger in a moment. But first of all, who is God angry with? It says, with all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth. Verse 18. Godlessness, the attitude of living without any regard to God. If I walked into your house, if I pushed my way in, if I took over your bedroom, your life, your television, I demanded food, and then I lived with absolutely no regard for you, that would be completely and utterly wrong. But in essence, that's what men and women have done in God's world. And this is a kind of history lesson that Paul is giving us. So first of all, the attitude of living without a regard for God. And God is angry because of that. And then the wickedness. It's because it's not just an attitude, it's the actions of doing what God tells us not to do. Now, God doesn't make rules to spoil our fun. He makes rules because he wants us to be protected from the damage that sin can do. He wants us safe. Now, it goes on to talk about these people suppressing, forcibly putting an end to the truth. And then in verses 18 to 20, it talks about creation. And also, it hints at conscience, telling us about the existence of God, the power of God, the nature of God, his invisible qualities clearly seen in the world around us. And yet, these people don't want to know. Who are these people? This is the natural situation of everyone before they find God. Before salvation, before they are saved and rescued. So if you this morning are someone who's lived in God's world, but never turned and thanked him for it, if you're someone who is lived without God, then this is the situation you're in. God is angry with you. How is God displaying the anger? Now, this is a frightening and tragic situation. How is God displaying his anger? Well, it comes in verses 24. It comes in verses 26. It comes in verses 28. 3 times it says in these verses, God gave them over. God gave them over to sinful desires, to shameful lust, to depraved minds. God gave them over. God is showing his anger by giving these people over. One of the worst judgments God can inflict on us is to let us have our own way. It is when God says, I am giving up on you. The picture is this. Just picture this in your mind. God is on the bank, safe on the sea, as it's the shore. He is holding in his hand a guide rope, which is attached to the boat that you're in. And the boat is being carried away by the tide. And the only thing that is keeping it safe and near the shore is God holding on to that rope. And we on the boat are shouting back, let go of the rope, leave us alone, get out of our lives, we don't want you. And in the end, God just lets go of the rope and the boat drifts into the abyss. When we read those words, God gave them over, that is the sort of picture it generates. A God who no longer wants to bring us home because we've pushed him away so much. In the end, he just lets go of the rope. God gave them over to sinful desires, to shameful lust, to depraved minds. These verses talk about what happens when a person goes on. Sinful desires, shameful lust, and depraved minds take over. In verses 24 to 32, you see the destructive and degrading picture of what a person becomes when God just lets them go. Now, I think it's wonderful that Sarah read those verses about forgiveness earlier on. Because the reality is that these verses, as we talk about God letting us, show us how much we need that forgiveness. We really do. Because it is only for the grace of God bringing us back and reeling us in that we can ever be right with God. The interesting thing as well as you read these verses is that if a person goes chasing after these things, and that's in essence why God lets them go, they go chasing after sinful things. What happens is God lets them have what they've been chasing after. But do they have it? No. It gets them. That is the frightening thing. In that phrase, God gave them over, there is this essence of the fact that you've got what you've wanted. But now, in essence, it has got you. There's an old Irish proverb that says, the man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, the drink takes the man. I don't know if you've come across that proverb. And the picture there is the man takes a drink because that's what he wants. And then it goes a bit out of control, the drink takes a drink, and eventually the drink takes the man. One of the worst judgments God can inflict on us is to let us have our own way. It is when God says, I'm giving up on you. But bear in mind as well, sometimes, and the story of the prodigal son is exactly this, sometimes God lets us go because it is the only chance of him ever getting us back. We may, if we read these verses in Romans, we may be people, we may know people, we may meet people who are caught up and trapped in these sinful desires. Maybe it's anger and bitterness. Maybe it's greed and materialism. They're chasing after more and better. Maybe they're caught up in sexual desires that you just can't control. We have to recognize that people have been given over to these things. It affects the world we are in. It is the reason we are in the mess we are in. God has given people over to the things that they have chased. And it is a sad and bleak picture. Let's move on to verse 21. I'm trying to hurry through because we should have finished. But verse 21, mankind has lost the knowledge of God. Let's go back to that picture. Go back to that picture of the toddler in the cot. Have we got that up? Thank you. At the top it says, a friend walks into a nursery to see this. All right? Just imagine walking in. First thing is, oh no, what a mess. Second thing is, how did this happen? And you look at the picture and you see, obviously the toddler got out of the cot. Obviously the toddler has found some paints and really gone for it. And then I wonder if this toddler, knowing that they've made a mess, has thought the best place for me to be right now is back in that cot. So they get in the cot and they look innocent. And I wonder if that's what took place in this situation. And the toddler's thinking, it can't have been me. I've been in here all the time. At this point, though, the parents know something. They know that that toddler can get out. They know they should have hidden the paints a lot higher and locked the cupboards. They know this. And now because they know it, they can stop it happening again. This is what it says in verse 21. It says, although they knew God, they neither glorified him nor gave him thanks.